No, it's not recording.
Okay. Appear, please remember to tell the delegates that you are recording.
Okay, okay, guys, let's first it out. We need to start now, guys. Remove everything.
Just on the top right hand corner of the
Remove your video.
You can check videos. Click there.
Stop video.
Yeah.
Is it this one?
Yes.
Thank you. That's good.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We are not going to start yet. Please just give us perhaps 5 more minutes to allow everyone to enter and join us. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, participants, activists, and comrades, good morning. My name is Apiwa Ziandantlemeza, and I'm very much honored to be your moderator and facilitator for this Tshintsha Makaya webinar that's scheduled today on the theme of harvesting change, amplifying youth activism for land and food justice in South Africa. Thank you for joining us today for this first virtual webinar that we are currently having. We apologize for the delay. We are just waiting on two of our speakers, but in the meantime, we will continue as scheduled for the webinar. I do know that some of our partners are currently hosting our activists from across the country. Welcome colleagues from Limpopo, from the Eastern Cape, from the Free State, and from the Western Cape. Thank you for organizing yourselves. This webinar brings together a remarkable group of individuals who are passionate about driving positive change in our society. We have esteemed panelists, dedicated participants, and a wealth of knowledge and experience that will undoubtedly contribute to an enriching and transformative conversation. So before I move to the Tshintsha Makaya webinar, I would just like to inform you of just minor changes into our program of the day. Unfortunately, Dr. Sibopedze, the head of the Western Cape Department of Agriculture, has sent his sincere apologies as he was urgently summoned to an important government meeting that he could unfortunately not miss. We completely understand the importance of his commitment to serving the province and community. But do rest assured, we have an exceptional lineup that will provide valuable insight as I've stipulated and contribute to our discussions on youth activism for land and food justice. Please just allow me to go through a few logistics for us to just structure our engagement for today. First, we will commence with the opening and welcoming remarks, which will set the stage for our discussions on the critical issues of land and food justice in South Africa. Following that, we will have the privilege of hearing from our esteemed panelists who bring a wealth of knowledge and experiences to the table. Each panelist will share their insights, their perspectives, and innovative ideas, shedding light on the challenges and opportunities surrounding land, food justice, and youth-centered social movements. Thirdly, once we've heard all of the panelists, we will also just transition into a more vibrant and interactive session. This is a special segment from Tshintsha Makaya called Amplifying Activists, Stories for Land and Food Justice. This segment will provide a platform for young activists like yourselves to share your powerful stories and experiences from your communities. Each participant will be designated time to share their stories. We do encourage you to be as authentic and passionate and concise in your presentations. Towards the end of the webinar, we will conclude with closing remarks, summarizing the key takeaways, and highlighting actionable steps that we will all collectively undertake to further the cause of land and food justice in South Africa. I do encourage you to actively engage and ask thought-provoking questions and share your valuable insights. So the webinar is very interactive in nature. There is a Q&A session that you can utilize to share your questions and to share your thoughts. The chat feature will assist you in that. We have also just curated a comprehensive agenda for the day that covers some of the aspects that I've just previously mentioned. So please just mind us in terms of time. We do invite you to share key moments, inspiring quotes, valuable insights from the webinar on your social media platforms. Please just make use of the hashtag Tshintsha to create more of a unified response. And then lastly, we will be streaming this webinar in our different platforms. So before I just continue straight into our webinar, it is a great pleasure for me to introduce to you Mr. Brian Adams, who is the CEO of the Surplus People Project. He will be gracing us and delivering the opening remarks and extend a welcome to the Tshintsha Makaya webinar. After you, Brian.
Thank you so much, Apiwe. I'm excited to be here. I think the conversations we're going to have today is conversations that is not just for this platform, but conversations that we take back to where we work, communities, young people. And so this is just the start of that process that Tshintsha Makaya is leading with its NGO and community partners. So let me just go right in with a message of welcome and just to kind of sketch a background to this time together. So as was mentioned, my name is Brian Adams. I'm the CEO of Surplus People Project. Surplus People Project is the fiscal host of Tshintsha Makaya. They're based in our offices, and I serve on the executive committee and guide as much as we can as an organization, Tshintsha Makaya and their team, and the formations that make up Tshintsha Makaya. So Youth Day in South Africa, as we know, observed on June 16, serves as a reminder of the power of youth activism in driving social change. In a nation grappling with issues of food, water, and land justice, youth activism has emerged as a formidable force for social and environmental justice. This webinar aims to amplify the voices of young activists and change makers, empowering them to lead transformative action for a more just and sustainable future. In addition, youth play a central role in discussions surrounding ecological justice, environmental consciousness, and climate change. And it is crucial for you to understand your role and the challenges today and ahead. Tshintsha Makaya is a collective action that advocates for the rights of marginalized communities in South Africa, striving for equitable access to land, resources, and services. Through grassroots mobilization, research, advocacy, and community engagement, Tshintsha Makaya has raised awareness about rural community struggle and advocated for policy reforms and inclusive solutions. This webinar aims to shed light on the remarkable efforts of youth activists in driving positive change in South Africa, focusing on food, water, and land justice issues. By exploring innovative strategies implemented by Tshintsha Makaya and other youth-led initiatives, the webinar aims to foster discussions, knowledge sharing, and insights from practitioners, researchers, and youth leaders working in agriculture, environmental justice, and human rights. The intersectionality of these issues and the role of youth activism in affecting positive change at different levels will be examined and explored. So with those few words, I welcome you to this webinar and hand you over back to the Tshintsha Makaya team. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. CEO, for that warm welcome. Next up, I'd like to introduce Ms. Priscilla Mdlalose, who is the National Coordinator of Tshintsha Makaya. She will be providing us with a quick, insightful brief on the purposes of the Tshintsha Makaya webinar. Just on that note, I do acknowledge our speaker, I am Ms. Ayaka Militafa. We're just introducing and starting the webinar. First, Ms. Priscilla Mdlalose, can you please just come up and do a brief purpose of the day for us? Thank you.
Thank you, Apiwe. And it's like my video is, can you enable my video? so that I think people would want to see the face. Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to greet everyone here. I think as Brian has said, I'm also very excited to be part of this conversation. I'm not a youth, but I'm young at heart. So it's always good to be amongst the young people because it means I will age well. So my role today is just to talk about Tshintsha Makaya. Who is this Tshintsha Makaya, or what is Tshintsha Makaya? So I think I will be just doing that. I'm trying to get the screen. Sorry, I can't share my screen. Can you assist, please?
All right.
Okay.
Do you have access? Are you able to share?
Yes, I'm there, but I'm clicking. I just want to, okay, let
Hold
me
on.
try again. I don't see my presentation here. Sorry for delaying you.
Hi, Priscilla. No, we can't see your screen as yet. Priscilla, please unmute.
Okay. So can I proceed then?
Yes, please
Aphiwe?
do. Yes, please do. We can't see your screen though.
Okay, yeah, now I think
Thanks.
you'll see my screen, yes. All right. So I think I did mention that Brian has indicated, he has given a little bit of background about Tshintsha Makaya. So I'm going to just quickly summarize on what he has already said. We were established in 2010. It was an—
Sorry, Priscilla, please put it on slideshow for me. Sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
It is on slideshow. It is on slideshow up here. Can I continue? Can you see that?
I'm just waiting a moment. Hold on. Okay, please continue. Apologies for that. No, it's not,
Okay.
but we can go ahead
Yes, yeah.
for time purposes.
No, I was saying that Brian has given a little bit of background of Tshintsha Makaya, and we were established in 2010. Those who are here, the Nguni speakers, will know the meaning of Tshintsha Makaya. Although when we translate it into English, usually we don't do a direct translation. So Tshintsha Makaya, we are saying it is improving the livelihoods in our households. So that is what we are about, but we do that working together with the NGOs and also with the community formations. So briefly, Tshintsha Makaya is an action learning platform, an alliance of community formations leading land and agrarian transformation struggles. So these community formations, they are supported by NGOs, and also the NGOs, they also work with the social movements. So Tshintsha Makaya create that platform where the NGOs and community formations can come together to learn from each other, because we believe that as we come together, it's not just a top-down a process, but we come together so that we can learn from each other. Our learning, it has a meaning because we learn so that we are able to influence our spaces. So in this case, we are able to influence our communities, but we are also influence the policies, the government policies that oppress us. So in brief, this is what Tshintsha Makaya is all about. So then the vision, what is the vision of, or the mission of Tshintsha Makaya? First of all, I just want to just highlight or quote this quotation by Asata. It says, nobody in the world, nobody in history has ever gotten their freedom by appealing to the moral sense of the people who were oppressing them. I think we can understand this quotation, and we can confirm that it is so true. If you want freedom, you cannot beg the oppressor to liberate you. You have to take action. You have to be conscious about your struggle and be able to act so that you are able to liberate yourself. So Tshintsha Makaya is really about that. Tshintsha Makaya is about supporting those formations, those activists, those NGOs that are working around the issues that are oppressing them so that they are able to liberate themselves. So our vision then is building a self-reliant and organized critical mass of social transformation and dignity, addressing the root causes of land and agrarian struggle. We understand that we cannot be superficial about the things that we do. We need to understand, you know, what are the root causes of the struggles that we face today. So that is the focus, or that is the vision of Tshintsha Makaya, to say, let us work together. But those who are already working on the ground, how do we build them? How do we support them so that we have these self-reliant comrades, we have these organized activists that are able to challenge those structures that are oppressing them. So what is then our goal as Tshintsha Makaya? One of our objectives is to establish and strengthen a connected network of activists who represent both rural and urban poor communities. When we started Tshintsha Makaya, I think the focus was more on rural communities, but we understand that the issues, there are common issues, whether you are in a rural area or you are in an urban space. So our goal then is to try and strengthen and connect those networks, because we understand that for us to be able to challenge the powers that be, we need to be together, we need to work together, we need to be connected. So that is one of our objectives. And another one is to coordinate impactful campaigns that effectively raise awareness and visibility of the challenges faced by both rural and urban communities. We also understand that there are people who are working in different communities, but for us to be able to be visible, that connection is important. But how do we do it? We do this through the campaigns that we support as Tshintsha Makaya. And then the last one, it is to organize and facilitate policy dialogues that bring together various stakeholders with the aim of exploring alternative strategies to achieve food sovereignty. Another thing is it's about policy, challenging the policies, because sometimes we look at the policies that we have, some of them, they are oppressive. So as Tshintsha Makaya Alliance, we look and we interrogate these policies so that we are able to challenge them and make those changes that are required so that we are able to liberate ourselves from all these oppressive forces. So how do we then work together as the alliance? First of all, we try to deepen our roots, you know, to the causes of the struggles that we have. And then another thing is to study the terrain. We work in different communities. So each and every community, we might have similar things, but you find that there are some of these things that are specific to those communities. So as Tshintsha Makaya, in terms of our support, we also try and study the terrain where each and every one of our comrades are working in. And then we also develop strategies and tactics so that we are able to address the challenges that we face. Sometimes we support the litigation if that is what is required at that point in time. But we also, in our coming together, we also try and deepen our understanding of the politics of the day. We are here today because of the politics. So we need to understand, you know, the root causes. What are the things, you know, that for us, it's not just to try and change the faces of the people that we don't want so and so, but there are issues, you know, those deep-rooted issues that we need to uproot so that we are able to change the status quo. So the understanding politics of the day is very important. And then we also support cadre development. We also, today we are about the youth participation. That is also one of our area. Most of our partners, they've been saying that, you know, there is lack of active or youth participation in the spaces where we are at. So we try then to support and make sure that we create platforms so that youth can speak out, so that the youth voices will be activated, but also through our interaction, we are able to create and support the social movements that are driven by young people. And then we also look at the issues or through the agroecology, looking at the issues of food production. That is also another area where we work together as Tshintsha Makaya partners. And then we also have challenges of patriarchy. So again, you know, as the women, when we talk about feminism, it's also about looking at how we liberate ourselves as women. So Tshintsha Makaya also provides that space where women, we also talk about gender issues because they affect us every day. And then lastly, it's that we provide the platform of action and the reflection, because if you reflect on issues, you are able to understand the issues in a broader sense. So you are not just looking at an issue, or you are not just looking at your struggle in isolation. Your struggle needs to be connected to the bigger whole. So Tshintsha Makaya also provide such a platform. So today we are coming together. It is our first webinar for the youth. As I've said that, you know, the youth participation for us is critical. We need to hear the voices of young people. So what is our purpose then for our webinar today? The first one is to raise awareness about the urgent issues of land and food justice in South Africa, with specific focus on challenges that are experienced by marginalized communities. And we know that youth is part of that marginalized part of our community. And there are so many issues that are facing youth. We are talking about the issues of unemployment. We are talking about the issues of gender-based violence, especially in rural areas. You might think that in rural areas it's safe. It is not safe. Some of our young girls, when they go out to fetch water, those are the spaces where they are being sexually abused. In the farming area, the farm workers, there are issues of gender-based violence even in those spaces. So as we come together in this fashion, we are here to come together so that we are able to raise awareness of the issues that are facing our young people. But we are also not looking at these issues in isolation. We are looking at them in relation to land issues. We are looking in these issues in relation to food security in South Africa. Another purpose is to amplify the voices, experiences, and perspective of youth activists, empowering each other to become influential advocates for change in the real lives of land justice and food security. So today, I'm hoping that we'll be able to learn from each other, empower each other. I think Brian did mention that, whatever that we are discussing today, the strategies that will come up today, we need to take that back to our communities, because the purpose is not just to feed ourselves. We are feeding ourselves so that we are able to feed others and to feed the nations. And then another purpose is to foster, knowledge exchange. I'm sure that as we come together today, one of us will bring something into the table. So together we can eat, we can share knowledge and ideas, and also to promote collaboration. I'm hoping that after this webinar, we will still continue to connect. We can have different avenues where we can continue to have conversation as young people within the land and food justice space. And then lastly, it is just to delve into intersectionality of issues concerning food, water, and land justice, with particular focus on the role of gender. I think I've touched on this a little bit, on race and social dynamics. So whatever that we are discussing, we must remember that we are doing this, we are trying to connect, this into the bigger whole. So that is really our purpose for today's meeting. I'm hoping that we will connect and we will engage. Please, young people, do voice the issues, but also share your experiences, because another thing, sometimes we come together and we share our challenges, but we must also share how we are resilient in our communities. We must share those strategies. They will help other young people who are going through similar challenges. So I think, yes, today is really about that, to hear your voices. Yes, we have, I think as Apio has said, we have the panelists, but most importantly, we need to connect with other young people. We need to talk. We need to see how we can move forward, whether we decide to have campaigns going forward, whether we decide to have indabas going forward. So that is the purpose of us facilitating this engagement today. So on this page, you can follow us, or we also have the website. It's our new website. Please do check it, have your comment on it. And then, yeah, enjoy the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Priscilla, Ms. Priscilla, for that brief purpose of why we are here today. We do apologize, as mentioned, for the IT issues. We are in the area on learning, and yeah, this new world of online can be quite difficult. We are now going to move into the schedule of our speakers. I do see that our speakers are here, but before I do, I'd like to just remind everyone of our rules for the day. and running order, if we can just please make use of the chat function for any Q&A, and just also insights or discussions. We will not, besides the panelists and the people that are scheduled to speak, be taking any hands. So I do see some of you have already raised your hands before even the scheduled webinar. Please, comrades, put them down. Thank you so much. Moving on now, I'd like to just introduce, as I've noted, we've noted that Doc unfortunately is unavailable to attend, and he has sent his sincere apologies. We will now be moving in to Mr. Lukhona Mnguni, and thereafter we will follow with Mr. Jeremy Moman, and lastly with Ms. Ayaka Malitafa. Mr. Lukhona Mnguni, excuse me. Mr. Lukhona Mnguni is a governance, politics, and development specialist, currently serving as the head of policy and research at the Rivonia Circle. He is well known as the host of the analytical current affairs show On the Spot with Lukhona Mnguni on ENCA. Previously, he hosted the flag show Power Talk on Power 987, a commercial radio station in Gauteng, the Gauteng province. Lukhona has contributed his expertise as a political analyst on various platforms, including ENCA, SABC News, Newsroom Africa, and 702 Radio, providing regular analysis of South Africa's important news headlines. He actively engages in public seminars and talks, focusing on the development of South Africa within the African and global context. Lukhona is a sought-after conference speaker for organizations ranging from the banking sector to civil society. He also serves as a board member for organizations aligned with his values and vision for society. He is currently pursuing his PhD in political science at the University of KwaZulu-Natal and holds a bachelor's degree in community and development studies. He holds a bachelor's degree in community and development studies and an honors degree in conflict transformation and peace studies, both achieved cum laude from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. In 2015, he completed his MEC in Africa and International Development at the University of Edinburgh, Scotland. Lukhona's research as a published scholar has benefited various institutions, including the film industry, through which his work on the documentary series On the Shoulders of Giants. Lukhona, can you please just come on screen for us? Oh, it's so cute.
Very
Hello, Mr. Mnguni.
hello, Apiwe.
And hello to the comrade, the little comrade.
Yes, this is Comrade Luyaka. So he's the future builder of South Africa. He's my little brother's son, and I'm left with him because for some strange reason, when I accepted this invitation, I didn't know that I'd be in the village today, and for a variety of commitments, I've had to find myself here. Luyaka, let's cooperate. And he's been left with me because nobody else wants to have him. But I think it's probably an interesting segue to our conversation this morning, in the sense that I've always felt that we are so rigid sometimes. Some people are probably looking at me and thinking, what's a baby doing on my screen? And I've always tried to create work environments where colleagues can bring their babies to work, and we can be as normally possible as we can rather than be curated. But I think today's question is much more broader than those issues, and I'll share a few thoughts up here that I have, because these are areas of work that one has thought about, deliberated on, and interacted with some of our thought leaders in society about where we probably should go, particularly around issues of land justice and where Mame when, particularly around questions of land justice and issues of how do we move forward insofar as youth activism is concerned in that, and of course food security. There's no doubt that if you look at all the markers in South Africa, one of our biggest concerns is around the issue of poverty. And I think not just poverty as a grand idea, but the question of food deprivation. And when we speak of food deprivation, we think about people who are not guaranteed a meal per day. Because sometimes when we use abstract terms like poverty, it seems like we are defining something that everybody is able to go through and they are able to weather the storms of poverty and so on. In South Africa, there's a material food deprivation issue where a number of people are not certain where their next meal is going to get to, depending on which register of statistics utilize. About just over 50% of people in South Africa are not so sure of their next meal, where it's going to come from. Now, the mere fact that these South Africans are not dying of hunger tells us that they are probably able to find survivalist tactics, whether it's to do work with payment in kind or to gravitate themselves into certain community networks and be able to be in a position to earn a meal, basically, for themselves. And in earning that meal, they are able to in earning that meal survive and see the next day and pressure on. However, these are not sustainable ways of survival, unfortunately. And I think the biggest issue that we face are more urban settings than rural settings, because one of the things that I was asked to talk to are issues around barriers to preventing equitable access to land. I think that was part of the things that I was asked to, and food justice, of course. And I find that, a lot of people have spoken about urban land hunger, urban poverty, and so on. And it is true, because generally people who find themselves in urban settings and peri-urban areas are so-called displaced people from rural areas. So they would have left my village where I am today to go seek greener pastures in Durban, in Johannesburg, in Cape Town, and so on. And they don't quite get these greener pastures, and therefore they are relegated to the peri-urban spaces, informal land settlements, and all of that. And in that, they experience a lot of issues, and not just food deprivation issues, but they also experience a lot of marginalization, inequitable access to resources, or no access to resources at all. And I think for me, if we are going to deal with questions around land justice and food justice, is to ask ourselves the proverbial questions that those of us who did geography probably a decade and a half or 2 decades ago used to be asked. Excuse me. Okay, you can press. Those of us who used to be asked, what are the pull and push factors from rural areas in dealing with spatial issues? Probably this is the time in the South African context for us to contend with those questions, so that we then ask the question, should you depopulate rural areas? The statistics that, of course, would come from the UN Habitat would tell you about the amount of migration that is happening from rural areas to urban areas. But is that a given? Can you stop that trend? Or do you take it as materially something that you cannot oppose? And we know that various countries around the globe have been thinking very seriously about questions around rural development and what that means, and not just rural development in terms of trying to convert rural areas to urban settings, but how do you develop rural areas within their context? And one of the issues, by the way, in rural areas is the land question. So we fall under those who are called as so-called informal land rights, Informal Land Rights Act persons, where there isn't a lot of clarity in terms of how much rural people own the land that they occupy, whether it has been owned by generations. I mean, the homestead I'm speaking to you from today, my grandparents have been here since the 1970s, so about 1974, but they've got a permission to occupy certificate. And Khalam Mutlante in his high-level panel report calls this a structural vulnerability, because in an instance where the chief or the traditional leader were to invoke their rights and their responsibilities to your piece of land, they would actually displace you by virtue of giving away rights, whether for mineral exploration, whether for development, and all of those other things. Now, the issue there for me becomes in rural settings. While I'm saying how do you do rural development, we also have these uncertain land regimes that we okay. We also have these. Okay, take this one. We also have these uncertain land regimes that we have that influence the trajectory of development. But at the same time, there's something I like about rural places and their land regime. And part of that is that in the village, whether you're employed or unemployed, you probably have the same and equal chance of being allocated a piece of land for you to build a home for your family. Now, this does not accord well with the logics of the so-called, this does not accord well with the logics of the so-called, urban settings where you are, given a piece of land, it's valuated, it's part of the commercial property market and so on. And you have to have some income, you have to have some debt profile, you have to have some guarantor that you'll be able to pay this money in order for you to get a piece of land. So there are certain things that work in the rural space that in terms of equitable sharing of resources that are available, if land were resource, I think there's quite good of that happening. And therefore, access to food justice, actually, I think in my mind, is far more is far more better than in urban settings, because in the rural space, you've got the presence and the possibility of land. You've got the equitable sharing of it between those who have and those who do not have. And then you've got the possibility of working the land if you've got the labor and the appetite to do that. Of course, we may later on in the conversation talk about issues of climate change and how they've now affected weather patterns. They've now affected, how people can work the land, even in rural areas, the incidents of, natural disasters and so on. So it's not just about the practical resources of whether do people have seeds, do they have the farming implements, do they have fencing and so on. But the weather patterns have actually changed in quite remarkable ways. In actual fact, if you go to some of the rural areas, you'll see the land has quite eroded. Soil erosion is a real thing, and other issues that have taken place, whether it's deforestation and all of that, and how much of that has impacted people's access to food justice. And therefore, when you think of food justice, you need to also think about the newer topics about people's adaptation to climate change, people's resilience to climate change, and then say what interventions are needed. Do you need to change the crops that people would ordinarily farm? Do you need to change the way in which people, sorry guys, I just have, okay. I just have a crash, I'm sorry. But what are the conversations we should be having about the future in terms of land, in terms of spatial development, in terms of climate change, and just our own adaptation in our localities and our local areas. So the points that I'm trying to communicate today is that we probably do need to have this conversation with the urban and rural divide imagination, borrow from each of those spaces what is urgent to address, what we are able to address and what we might not be able to address in terms of where we are. But I do think that possibly rural areas offer us much more to think about and to imagine in terms of where we need to go and where we need to be. Because if we do not do that, unfortunately, we will be forced into only imagining about urban areas because we are told that majority of our population will find itself in urban areas. I'll take a pause here, Apiro, because my people are just so rowdy now and I don't want to drown it.
Okay, would you like to take one question or perhaps later, and then we can move to the next speaker?
I could take a question.
All right. So I just thank you so much, Mr. Mnguni, for that presentation, and so much pressure as well, and those cuties. So you spoke so much in terms of also the dynamics, especially in rural areas and how difficult it is, and the importance thereof of also starting there. Within your expertise and experience as also part of the Rivonia Circle, what do you think is needed to build the right kind of youth-centered movement, as particularly in those rural areas on land and food justice? I'll give you that one, and then perhaps just time for you to breathe, and then we'll move on to the next speaker, and others will ask you questions later on. Thanks.
Okay, I'll address that when others come so that I can deal with this little person.
Okay, that's fine with me as well. Once again, thank you so much. I'm just going to move on now to our next speaker for the day. We do have here Mr. Jeremy Maman. Mr. Jeremy Maman is a distinguished founder and director of the Initiative for Community Advancement, which is also known in short as ISCA, on the west coast of South Africa. In 2006, he completed his qualification in community development work at the University of the Western Cape. Since then, Jeremy has held positions in various government spheres and esteemed non-profit organizations within the West Coast region. Jeremy boasts extensive network experience, having facilitated numerous international programs to be implemented in South Africa. Notably, he played a pivotal role in securing a license agreement from the My Machine Global Foundation, granting exclusive rights to implement the renowned My Machine program in the country. As a contributing author of the book titled, "What is Your Dream Machine? How Children Change Education Worldwide," Jeremy provides insightful context along with the reasons and methods behind the My Machine initiative. The book is a foreground by Sir Ken Robinson and chapters by esteemed institutions like the New York Academy of Sciences and Harvard University, and is also available globally. Welcome, Jeremy. How are you, Mr.? Please put on your video and mic for me.
Hi, I'm well.
See you.
Yeah, good to be here. Good to be here. Thank you very much for the kind intro.
Thank you for joining us.
Certainly.
Can you take it away, and then perhaps I can ask you questions later?
Oh, for sure, definitely.
Thank you so much.
So thank you very much for that. And I actually want to latch on to what Lukona said towards the end of his input when the two babies got too much for him. And I think it's quite interesting that they had the babies with him and showing how, in what way women in our country is having to fend for themselves with still all of these kinds of responsibilities. So I think it's lovely that he was able to bring the kids on. And at the same time, he touched on a point which I think is will be quite useful for me to engage my input on. He's talking about the benefit of the value that the rural settings, rural areas can in fact give us. So we work, our community foundation, we operate within the Bergrivier municipal area in the West Coast of the Western Cape. And as an organization, we've over time explored a number of innovative ideas and programs to encourage youth active participation in development work, youth activism at the community level, more so in rural locations all over South Africa. So by way of introduction, the issues that we're facing, that activists are facing, is, like Ms. Priscilla said as well, are intersectional, and there are often cases, as far as I look at it, they are really, really well defined. People tend to have a very clear grasp of the extent of what the issues are. There's no lack of academic discourse and writing on the interconnectedness of the societal challenges that we're sitting with. And I do find that because we are so aware and so clear about what these issues are and in agreement of them, it gives us a very unique opportunity to respond as a collective to those issues. So what we found is, I mean, I was asked, for example, to reflect on what for me some of the biggest challenges that activists face. And I thought to touch on two, which I think is quite challenging, but I wanted to touch on them being challenging whilst providing some sort of ideas and solutions and how we can actually move forward, having unearthed what these challenges are. Now, the first of which I think most of the activists on the webinar would agree with me that limited access to resources tend to be a very serious challenge for activism. And there is resources from financial and otherwise, but I tend to feel also that there's a lot of limitation as far as access to networks. Because what we tend to do, by right, of course, is we tend to navigate towards like-minded individuals, like-minded activists that sort of fight for the same cause, which is great. At the same time, I do think there's an absolute opportunity to start networking across with different actors all over the development spectrum. Because if you start doing that, and if we do start doing that, we can potentially start presenting our causes in front of other people that are fighting different causes, and we can come up with collective solutions that can really take us forward, innovative solutions that can actually take us forward. So oftentimes, because we're in the same sector or fighting for the same cause in our network, we tend to regurgitate the same issues and the same solutions. But if we were to expand our networks, we could potentially come up with some very interesting and innovative ideas that can really advance our cause. So there's certainly, for me, the issue of a lack of access to financial resources, but also an access to expanded networks. So that for me is the first one. Then, of course, as Priscilla also mentioned, the really complex legal and policy frameworks that are being faced, understanding these intricacies of land legislation and engaging with government process requires expertise and resources that oftentimes might not be available all over the country. And how do we in fact get experts closer to the cause where they faced, or where people are facing these things on a day-to-day basis? What we tend to be talking about at the moment is that a lot of the engagements happen in the metros. A lot of the activisms happen on social media platforms, which is fantastic. And we need to find a way, though, to actually bring those causes and to bring the fight to the streets of where people live. Now, when I talk about bringing the fight, is really bringing the understanding of the issue and hearing from the very people that deals with these issues, hearing from them wherever they're based and where they face those issues. And it's quite interesting as we're engaging today that we are saying that there's almost a decline in having young people standing up for the issues of land rights, food security, and food sovereignty in this broader sense. And how do we get young people involved? How do we actually get young people? How do we entice young people by educating them, and to actually have a bit more appetite and be less apathetic to these really, really important issues? I mean, the climate crisis that we are sitting with, it's not a crisis of a particular sector. It's a crisis of humanity. and we need to look at the solutions from an holistic perspective as well. So those for me are some of the challenges that I wanted to reflect on. Not saying that none of the other things are challenging or as challenging, but I just wanted to bring those two up because I wanted to propose maybe an idea for colleagues and comrades to think about today. And one of them is that the whole idea of youth or community philanthropy. And in our community foundation, we are a philanthropic organization or a giving organization. In our work, we've one of the international programs that we brought to South Africa is a program called Youth Bank. Now, in Youth Bank, this is not a bank. This is really a youth funding mechanism where local people, young people from rural communities and urban communities can co-invest financially and otherwise to get pooled funding to be available and to be granted to projects where people feel they need to be supported. Now, I'll give you an example of this. So young people in our municipal area, in a town called Wittewater. Now, Wittewater is a Moravian mission station, meaning that the land is owned by the Moravian Church. People have access to land, people can farm, people can grow food, people can build houses, but people don't own the land. And the colleague previously spoke about this as well. Now, in Wittewater, because it's a church community, we have this youth bank project where young people actually started talking about how do we actually in our community, which is a church-based community, how do we actually have ablution facilities? How do we have toilet facilities in our community? Because we don't have toilet facilities. Now, for young people to start talking about something like having toilet facilities in a community is almost bizarre because you would assume that the older people would be thinking of this. But young people actually said this is a real issue when there's funerals in the community. There's a small rural town. When there are funerals, where there are weddings, where there are big gatherings, people would have to actually go to people's homes to use toilet facilities, and not they can't do it because there's no other facilities at the church and other places. So these young people came up with this challenge, with this problem. They identified this as a big problem. Now, through the youth bank methodology, the young people then were able to pitch this problem and come up with solutions, fundraising solutions, ways that they will actually raise money locally into the fund mechanism to be able to support the building of toilet facilities in this community. Now, this is how you not just in our view, you're not just doing activism. You're not just talking about the issue and mobilizing the community around the issue, but you go a step further. You actually start raising funds. You actually do something about addressing that problem. So we're finding that these kind of programs are starting to help us to talk about what I now term self-funded activism. Because if we're sitting with the problem of having financial resources for our activism, how are we able to self-fundraise? How do we raise money to actually support our own activism activities? And I think this youth philanthropy can be a vehicle to be able to do that. And I do think there's a really, really strong connection and potential connection between activism and youth philanthropy. Because like I'm saying, if we can get young people to actively fundraise for the very issues that they care about, that they feel should be addressed at the local level, then it's really powerful. We're really in this way starting to bring about systemic change by people standing up and taking up the responsibility that comes with their constitutional rights. And then finally, let me just give you some examples also in as far as what has happened in Bergrivier already. In Bergrivier, we've established a youth public participation program, and we've shared this with colleagues here at Tshintsha, Makaya, and SPP a few months ago. This program is called My Town or My Dorp in Afrikaans. And this program is really an innovative way to ask children in schools what would transform, what is missing that will make their town their dream town, what will transform their community into a dream community for them. Because I tend to agree with Lucano when he says that rural places can in fact be the solution. We could potentially find a time in the not too distant future we will have an exodus of people out of the urban locations back into rural locations. But then the exodus back might not be coming back to an urban setting. They might be coming to well-functioning and well-structured rural location. And what does that look like? through the My Door program, you start asking these kind of questions. What would your dream town look like? What kind of features and fixtures or facilities would you love to have in your town to transform your town? Now, once young people of the children, kids would have defined those challenges, we would actually ask young students, architecture students, product design students, and so forth, to come up with scale models of this dream town ideas to be put on a scale model. We have versions of this in our organization that you'll be able to, if you reach out to me, we'll be able to show you some of these scale models. So it's on these scale models, and of course, then the young people that are in the youth bank program would then set out to raise funds to actually finance some of these project ideas or some of these facilities ideas that the youth, the children asked for. But what we also do is we actually put those scale models in front of municipal decision makers. We put it in front of the mayors, we put them in front of ward councillors and ward committee members. So as the integrated development plan, also known as the IDP of the local municipality, are developed, we actually as a community foundation, we're putting the desires and dreams of the children and of young people in front of these decision makers to get those projects in the IDP. Because as you might know, if a project is not listed or a need is not prioritized in the integrated development plan, chances are the municipality might not be able to fund or put any financial and other resources towards it. So we then try to make sure that the ideas of the children actually lands up in the integrated development plan. Now, you might know or you might not that the integrated development planning process is a very important process at the municipal level. The IDP is reviewed annually. And much like we're finding difficulty to get young people involved in activism, in the same way, we're not getting young people to attend these IDP hearings. Now, because we're not getting young people to attend these IDP hearings, it means that the desires and dreams of young people are not reflected in this very important development document for the local municipality. And then finally, we've had quite a number of grants being made by these our youth fund by virtue of the youth banks. So young people through these youth bank committees, they've actually funded small businesses in our municipal area. They funded social enterprises. And over the last 3 years, thousands of rands have been raised by these very young people and donated in grant form, not in loan form, as a grant as startup capital, as rebuilding capital and development finance for small businesses and social enterprises. So this colleagues, is just an input in as far as what I feel a correlation or connection that does exist for activism and youth philanthropy. That in fact, my contention is that activism can indeed be self-funded if we think innovatively about it. So Apiwa, I think that is what I wanted to share today, and I hope that it's adding some value to our deliberations.
Thank you so much, Mr. Maman, for also just showing the intersections between philanthropy and activism as well, and how we can just fund our movements. I do hope that our panel and participants mainly will have questions for you later on for engagement as well. I'm just going to move on now to our next speaker, Ms. Ayaka Melitafa. Ms. Ayaka Melitafa is the founder of Ayaka Melitafa Foundation. She holds the distinction of being the youngest commissioner on the Presidential Climate Commission in South Africa, and serves as a public representative of the African Climate Alliance, a youth-led climate advocacy group. This organization successfully organized the #Climate Strike protest in Cape Town, collaborating with over 1 million youths worldwide. Ayaka is also a graduate of Project 90 by 2030's YouLead initiative. In recognition of her achievements, Ayaka was honored with the Woman of First Award for the Charlotte Makaya Institute. Additionally, she was nominated as one of South Africa's most powerful women by the Mail and Guardian in 2020, and was selected as one of the 5 winners of the Matrix in Antarctica program. Her impactful activism has allowed her to represent the voices of youth from the Global South on various national and international platforms, including the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, and Scotland, where she represented South Africa in the country's delegation. Ayaka's mission is centered around addressing the urgent ecological crisis of our time. She strives to enhance leaders' comprehension of complex issues, shapes new models and standards, and drives scalable and collaborative action of systematic change. I'd like to introduce Ms. Ayaka. Please just mute and enable your video for me. I'm unable to see you though. And can you just project your... Okay, let me try to find you. Hold on. Hello, it's a pleasure. Welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me properly?
Please just try to project a bit louder for people. Try to check your mic and sound. A bit.
Let me disconnect the headphones.
Please, thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, that's perfect. All right, take it away then.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Perfect.
Okay, great. So thank you so much for the introduction. And I've been quite inspired by the...
Hi, Ayaka. What happened? Please try again, because it was perfect, Nana.
Okay, one moment.
She's using a microphone.
Can you hear me now?
Can you try your microphone? Because you were better. I'm not sure what's happening now.
Am I clear now?
Yes, this is perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you for this invitation. And I've been very inspired by the speakers that went before me. And as a climate justice activist in the South African context, it's very different from the global context of activism. Right now, we're in this period where climate activism is on an all-time high. Young people are getting noticed and invited to international forums to represent their countries and also to get their voices heard. And we've seen a lot of this in South Africa as well, because when I joined the African Climate Alliance, we were able to organize a strike in Cape Town in collaboration with more than 1 million youth all over the world. So for me, I want to come with the perspective that actually a lot of action and change is happening now, and young people are quite active in the space of activism, be it if you're an activism for gender issues, be it if you're an activist for economic issues or even climate change. In my experience, I've seen a lot of young people that are into the spaces that I have been in as an activist as well. But as an activist in the South African context, we have big challenges addressing the ecological crisis because, firstly, we are very highly dependent on coal. That is no secret at all. And it makes it quite hard for us to start the conversation on how can we become more sustainable, how can we reduce our greenhouse emissions. And even though Africa is contributes to less than 4% of global emissions, South Africa as a country itself is one of the countries with the highest global emissions in the world. And that is something that we've been quite battling with as climate activists in South Africa, is how do we raise awareness about the detrimental effects of coal on people, the detrimental effects of climate change on our people in South Africa, yet we are the highest polluting, one of the highest polluting countries in the world. And that's basically one of the issues, that's one of the reasons why I appreciate the Climate Commission so much, the Presidential Climate Commission so much, is that we as civil civil society, scientists, government, business, labor, we're trying to come together to actually see how can we produce a framework or produce a roadmap essentially of how South Africa can start just decarbonizing its country, and how can we start moving to renewable energy and actually increasing job opportunities for young people as well. So by being part of the Presidential Climate Commission, it's quite an empowering position for young people to actually take part in policy, to get their voices heard, and so that the people can listen to us, people like government can listen to us and actually know what kind of change we want to see and actually know what kind of future that we want to see. And I've seen a lot of young people taking part in multiple provinces. Obviously, the activism is not where we would like it to be. We would like to reach more of the people that get affected, like young people in Mpumalanga, young people in KZN, but it's becoming a little bit hard because of obvious issues like data, network, and just not knowing about climate change in general. You'd be surprised how many young people don't know about climate change. So another point I would like to talk on is my advocacy. It's very much focused on the just transition right now as I'm working with the Presidential Climate Commission. And one of the issues that we normally face as young people is the fact that we don't feel like we are heard. Most times, me in my early days of activism, I would get invited to events just to be used as a token, essentially, just so that they can tick a box and say, young people were present today, and we hear young people's voices, when in actuality is that they're just using us to be there, to say that they're listening to us, and then they just go back and do the exact same things that they were doing before. And as young people, that used to frustrate us so much. And it's not only that, the second thing that was very frustrating as a young person in spaces of policy or these big conferences that we get invited to is that there's a lot of miscommunication and complicated jargon. So it's very hard for us to understand the policy language that they use. It's very hard for us to understand the terms that they use. So even when you have something to say, you're not sure if you should raise your hand and say it, because you often wonder, is it relevant to the topic that is being spoken? Or sometimes you just sit quietly throughout an entire event because you have no idea what people are saying. So a lot of the challenges young people face is the fact that we get lost in the language that is being used in these high spaces of decision-making. So as young activists, we really would love to get more accessible language, essentially, but we do also understand that if we want to engage in policy, we have to at least be educated in policy language. That way they will be able to listen to us, because the last thing that we need is to go into spaces, not understand the policy, and find ourselves agreeing to things that we don't even know what they mean. So I really appreciate organizations and NGOs that support young people and give young people the opportunity to learn about policy, learn about the work that we're not normally exposed to, because just like me, a lot of young people in the climate space, we don't learn about climate change in school. We don't learn about it on the news. We often teach ourselves through social media, or we join NGOs that have something to do with social justice. And that's how we actually been empowered. We've been able to get so much knowledge and be able to conduct research on our own because we've been empowered by an NGO. So if there's any way for NGOs to be more actually supported, that would be absolutely great. And as young people, we're actually in a position where we want to start our own organizations. I know I'm in the process of establishing my own organization, but it's difficult, man. There's a lot of things that we're not told about when you want to start your own organizations. There's tax implications, there's the structure, there's actually registering your organization as an NGO, as an NPC, all of those things. And in order for young people to be empowered, we need support in those areas as well. I know that Tshintsha Makaya aims to amplify land justice and food justice, and that touches home for me quite a lot, because my mother is a small scale farmer, and the whole reason I actually got into activism is because we got affected by a drought. and that drought caused the rain to stop coming, the rivers were drying up, and we were no longer to have a livelihood because our crops were drying out basically, and we couldn't feed our livestock. They were dying by the numbers, and it was completely devastating because as a small scale farmer, you don't just provide for your family, but you aim to provide for the community. And when the rain stopped coming, a lot of people were suffering in my community. And that's why I really wanted to be an activist. And that's what's driving me to this day, is that climate change is not just an environmental issue. It is a social issue, it's an economic issue, it is an environmental issue as well. And we have to address it, because if we do not address the ecological crisis of our time, then even if we can address things like poverty, we will still be at a disadvantage because the earth is actively trying to get rid of us. And the mistake we often make as people is assuming that we are hurting or harming the earth, or we're damaging the earth. But in actuality, we are hurting ourselves, because when we all get extinct because of the issues of climate change, the accelerated natural disasters, the earth will regenerate. It will be okay without us. So we are the ones that are in trouble here, and we are the ones that have to think about our future, have to think about our children, have to think about what kind of earth we want to live in the future. So for Tshintsha Makaya, this has been a webinar where I learned quite a lot of information. I would love to learn a bit more about what you guys do and how I can get more active, because it's something that really touches my heart. As I said, with my mom being a small scale farmer and knowing firsthand how devastating it is when your land is getting destroyed right in front of you, when you become food insecure and you have nowhere to turn to. So I really, really appreciate the work that you're doing. I know that you're also very active in educating young people on activism. And I feel like it's time where we as NGOs start to collaborate and we come together and share ideas, because land issues, water issues, food insecurity, they all are intersectional issues. And if we can stand in solidarity with one another, we can actually make a much bigger impact in South Africa. Because right now, we need to put more pressure on our government to actually start taking the climate crisis seriously. Because if the government does not address it, then it's going to be very hard for young people to recover in the future. It's going to be very hard for us to get jobs. Even though it's hard for us now, it's going to become way harder in the future. So one thing I would love to pose to you guys in all of your capacities is that you maybe take part in some of the PCC events, like we host events, we do webinars where we educate young people, we do webinars where we host consultations in multiple provinces to actually gauge young people or to gauge communities as well on what kind of future do you want to see, what kind of activism do you want to take part in, because we need more young people to be active in policy spaces. But we won't get young people to be active in policy spaces if, one, we're not aware of these spaces, and secondly, if the language is too complex for us. So here I see two things that we can do, is that we go to our relative spaces and we start teaching young people about how to engage in policy. If we can't let the policymakers bring the language down to us, I think it's our duty as activists and NGOs to equip our young people with the language of policy. Let's let young people be able to break down complex terms. Let's explain it to them. Let's let them know what certain things mean, so that when they go into policy spaces, they feel empowered to speak up. And as I was saying, the PCC holds a lot of engagements online and in person. And if you want to get more active with the PCC, if you want your voice to be heard as a young person on the PCC matters, please go to the Presidential Climate Commission website. So you just go to your Google search and you just type in the Presidential Climate Commission. You will find our website there. Please click join in. When you click join in, you can put in your details there and you'll be kept updated with the work that you're doing, the outreach that we do. And you can even get the opportunity to actually take part in webinars just like this one, where we aim to really get young people representatives in the room. We really aim to get people that are living that are affected by climate change, that are affected by land issues, that are affected by food insecurity. we really want to hear your voice. That's the most simple I can put it. And we want to empower you to know that you have power, you to know that your voice is valuable, and for you to know that you have a role to play in making sure that we transition from this highly toxic, highly coal induced power structure and go to more renewable energy with more jobs and livelihoods that basically don't deteriorate our health in the process. And the last thing I would like to say here is, oh, sorry. The last thing I would like to say is basically, we all in this space have a responsibility. We come here, we engage in webinars, and we keep that knowledge to ourselves. If we come to a webinar and we engage and we say, wow, this was so good, but then we keep that knowledge to ourselves, then it's a disadvantage. We basically aren't inching forward to change. So what I would like to encourage you to do, be it this webinar, the next webinar you attend, any event that you attend, every time you learn something new, every time you get information, it's quite important for you to share it. Whether it be a nice social media post about what you've learned, something you've experienced, be it just sitting down and talking to someone in your community about what you've learned. Let's try to get information out there, because real change always starts with awareness. People standing up, people getting the opportunity to learn something. And one last thing that I would like to advocate for is that we bring this up at our schools. Young people are not getting taught valuable things, like the climate crisis, or even if we get taught about the climate change, it's only small scale and it's not very realistic. And in order for us to really drive scalable change, the climate crisis has to be mainstreamed in education. And that's one of the things we as the African Climate Alliance strive for, is that the climate crisis be integrated into the curriculum so that young people can learn about climate change at all levels, not only high school, not only tertiary, but from the primary school level. That way we can learn, grasping this knowledge, getting more informed about this knowledge, so that when we actually grow up, we can decide whether we want to go to university and become an environmental scientist. We can decide whether you want to stay in your community, see your problem and fix it. There's a lot of opportunity out there for young people to get funding internationally when we solve climate issues, but our people will never be exposed to it if we don't talk about it outside of spaces like these. So I would like to end off by saying, thank you so much for this opportunity to engage. Please feel free to ask me questions. And I do really hope that you've learned something from this webinar, from the speakers before me, as well as from me as well. But thank you so much for this opportunity.
Wow, thank you so much, Ms. Ayaka. We do see a lot of engagements there. Thank you. So before we just jump into the Q&A, and thank you so much, Ms. Ayaka, once again for also representing us and our voices as well as young people so well, and especially in these spaces, articulating so well what it means, even in the spaces and the work that we still need to do. I already just took points because you also gave us two takeaways already in terms of defining even the work that we're doing and the partnerships as alliances and NGOs. Before we just move into the Q&A session, I noted earlier on that we do have our activists joining us remotely, collectively actually, and hosted by our alliance partners in different areas and provinces. I did mention that we have Limpopo, we have the Free State, we have the Eastern Cape and the Western Cape designated. What I'd like to do, and please assist me here, my co-host, Brian and Lindy. If those that are, and we'll start with the Eastern Cape. Can you please raise up your hand? We just want to say hi to see the comrades collectively. I'm just going to try something different. Just bear with us here. Brian, if you could assist with just unmuting so that we can say hi and see the comrades in the Eastern Cape. Are we making any progress? Stobozile, are you from the Eastern Cape? Please just thumbs up if you are. No. Abenati Zozo, we've just unmuted you also. Please show your video for us. Can you show the comrades for us? Thank you.
Good day, everyone.
We don't see you on video. Is it Abenati? Let me try to.
Show the video.
Unfortunately. Please hold on. Oh, unfortunately, because of the settings, we won't be able to see, but can you just, hi comrades, how are you? Are you able to see me? Unfortunately, we won't be able to see you, but please do share on social media your pictures together and tag us. Can we speak to you, Avenati? Hello.
Hello. Good day.
Hi, everyone. Hi, comrades.
Hi, comrades. How are you guys doing?
We're good. On yourself? Where are you joining us from?
I'm good.
Quick one.
I'm training from Chesterfield, Silvertown.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us collectively. Moving on to another province.
I'm from West.
Limpopo. Are you in the house?
No, I'm from.
Limpopo, are you in the house? Khadi. Hello, Khadi. You're unmuted. How are you? Khadi, please speak to us. Okay.
Hi everyone, you're speaking to Khadi from Limpopo. And
hello Khadi, how many are you and where are you centralized?
We are based in Limpopo under Ngos Development Association, and I'm with my colleague Mamraka Kola and Malatelo Mahali.
All right, thank you, colleagues. All right, thank you for joining us collectively. Moving on to our next region. Please, we are looking for those that we know that are collectively in groups, specifically, colleagues. So please, if you could just raise up your hands. The Western Cape, the Youth Center in the Western Cape. I know some of you are yes. Mukezi, are you the one?
Greetings, colleagues. We are in group in Free State in Botshabelo Unemployed Movements offices. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues, for joining us. Thank you, Free
Yes,
State.
we are joining. Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to the Western Cape quickly. We need to go into the Q&A sessions. Thank you. Okay, I guess the Western Cape doesn't want to bring the game then. All right, let's move into Q&A. So please share your questions to the panelists for us. I do see my bunny, please, we are going to unmute you now. And boys, please unmute Brian. Hi, boys.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
I'm Tina Jansen and I'm with Boise. And my comrade Kusumbu, and we in the Rural Legal Center in the rural areas in Robertson, in the Western Cape.
Hello, Western Cape. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, my bunny. Last person that we're going to say hi to. Unfortunately, I do apologize for that. I forgot that I made sure the settings don't allow for video. All right, my bunny, can you go ahead?
Mute.
Hello?
Hello, where are you joining us from?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, my buddy. Please go ahead.
Yeah, we are joining from Free State, we're Group B.
Yes.
Livestock, Sabelo livestock farmers. Can you say hi, guys?
Hey, comrades.
Thank you.
Hello. Thank you so much. Appreciate you for bringing it on. Thank you so much, colleagues and partners, for helping us with setting this up and organizing. All right, we're just going to move on into the Q&A sessions right now. If you have any questions for our panelists, please let us know. I am glad though that some of the panelists have already, their talks are very much intersectional. And I guess this is the entire aim of the webinar as well, because we do see the alliances within. I'm going to start with you, go back to you, Mr. Mnguni first. I've asked you a question in terms of the expertise, and I hope you are available for this one. In terms of the expertise that you have as part of the Rivonia Circle, and also just sharing in terms of how difficult it is specifically to show up and in rural areas and the work that needs to be done there. What do you think is needed to actually just start building a social movement centered on a youth-centered social movement centered on food and water security in South Africa? I hope you're available. Thank you. Hello.
Well, I think it's very simple for me, really. I would say that what you need is the democracy builder of the Rivonia Circle, which is a structured listening tool that we use to engage communities over 8 hours on the issues that they are worried about insofar as their communities and the country is concerned, but also their future aspirations in terms of their future aspirations for South Africa 2.0. And also then we engage communities on a 6 weeks project. But I think that alliance building is probably our biggest mainstay in terms of the next wave of development that we're thinking about as civil society in South Africa. So if you're thinking about issues around water, then you've got to look at, for example, Outer SA and what they've launched in terms of equipping communities with water testing capabilities in terms of the safety levels of water that is available to them. You've got to think about other alliances that are concerned about, water development. We know, for example, from the very Department of Water and Sanitation's admission that, whether it's their blue dropper reports, whether it's their issues around the sustainability of water reticulation in the country, we are doing extremely badly. We're losing vast amounts. For me, it's not even about the amount of water we're able to actually transmit to households. It's about how much water are we losing in the system, and therefore what can we then resolve as opportunities for young people to be involved, to be employed, to be innovative, and be challenged to come up with innovative ways in terms of how we can track and trace our water systems, the sustainability of our water systems, the leakages in our water systems, and then how we can avert and abate some of those. And of course, we know that we're dealing with a very ailed infrastructure and so on. But the whole point really for me is about how do we bring players, because one thing that I have found up here, having moved into the civil society space over the last 2-3 years in a sort of a full-time basis, is that there's a lot of fragmentation. Too many people are doing the same similar things, but they are so fragmented and so in silos. And one of the things that as the Rivonia Circle we've been trying to do is how do we bring these people closer and closer to each other so that they act with volume. And a good example, by the way, is what we've managed to do with the electoral reform agenda. When we hosted the electoral reform in Ndaba in September last year, we brought vast amounts of civil society organizations that work on democracy, constitutionalism, and elections into one voice and one block. And that actually shifted the dial in terms of how we're engaging with parliament and other institutions. And therefore, I think I'm hopeful in my expectation that as we move forward, one of the key things that this moment calls for is for consolidation. It's not an absence of NGOs or community-based organizations working in particular areas. It's about how you find them and consolidate them into a one block, not to dilute their identities as individual entities, but also to leverage exactly on their diversity, but then to amplify their voice as a consolidated block. And I think that's the biggest, for me, that's the biggest frustration I have with civil society. And I think if we can do that and continuously do it at scale, do it with education, do it with health, do it with water, do it with youth. But the last point I'm going to say, and this is why we work the way we do at the Rivonia Circle, where we don't expect others to bridge the rural-urban divide. We do it ourselves. Most of our democracy builders are in rural areas. Most of our work is in so-called peri-urban and marginalized communities. That's why we can tell you we've got a community in Ulundi, as much as we've got a community in Umbu, as much as we have a community in the outskirts of Gqeberha, in Vierplaas, and so on. And that's because one of the things we've not done well is that civil society in urban areas has been ably supported, ably resourced, and civil society in rural areas has literally lived hand to mouth. And we need to then cross-collaborate across the urban and the rural divide, not in theoretical terms. We've got to do it ourselves. And as the Rivonia Circle, I think we are doing that, and our modus operandi testifies to that. And we are able to then leverage in terms of those communities when, for example, big events are being held, or so-called elite and prestigious events are being held. We are then able to call people who would not find themselves in the same rooms as certain actors because ordinarily they would not be invited. But when people say, Rivonia Cycle, please bring 40 people to our event, we are then able to take the whole spectrum of society into that event because we've been to those areas. We're not using proxies to galvanize people from those particular areas. So the point I'm making is that I think urban civil society needs to make a concerted effort to leverage its resources and share its resources and expertise with civil society in rural settings, because civil society in rural settings is survivalist, working against the odds and really grinding against a tide that is working against them. And I think if we can achieve that and recognize our privilege, and then sort of say, how do we decentralize our privilege and how do we benefit others with our privilege? I think that we would move much more than we are as a society.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mnguni, for that. I don't note any other questions from your end or any other speakers. I'm just going to go to you, Mr. Moman. I do note that Ayaka had to rush to another event and has apologized for that, for any questions that anyone might have had in her absence. Thank you for her again for the lovely presentation. And thank you, Mr. Mnguni, for multitasking and the time that you've provided for this webinar for us as well. Jeremy, when you were speaking, someone also noted issues of sound. So I'd like you to just touch more on just the methodology again. I think it's quite important in terms of how we become self-sufficient and mobilize ourselves and in terms of funding in our movements. So if you can just a little bit again in terms of the work that you've done, the type of model that you have. Thank you so much. I do note that, Mr. Mnguni, thank you so much for joining us once again. We forgive you, and Siabulela. My colleagues from before you join in, sorry, thank you again, Jeremy. I'd like to also just highlight, my colleagues are calling me out for missing KZN. Colleagues from the KZN, we do apologize for that. We have just been notified that also the colleagues, thanks for the call out. We have been notified that also the colleagues are coming in separate areas also in KZN. Welcome colleagues, once more. How can we forget Kaloga, the important province? Moving along to you, Jeremy, if you can just shed light for us, and then I think we can move on to our next exciting segment of Young Activists.
Thanks very much, Apiwe. I think one of the things, someone posed a question I saw in the chat as well that I wasn't quite sure about. I wasn't sure the colleague was. The point was on that planning processes doesn't have youth target indicators, and if it does have it, it tends to be a tick box exercise with no real youth-led initiative. So I was a bit unsure if the person was referring to the IDP point that I made to the integrated development plan at the municipal level, or reflecting on what I suggested as far as our own program is concerned. But just to say that, firstly, I actually want to link that point on tick box back to the 2 points that actually the 2 other presenters also made. So the one where Makaya was talking, for example, on how when young people are invited to attend these gatherings or these seminars or conferences on land rights or climate change, etc., that there's such a lot of jargon happening that you're sitting there and you have something of value to add, or at least you think you have something to add, but you can't necessarily place what you're wanting to say in the jargon or the high-level lingo that people are putting out. I think this has been a very big issue within our sector, within our activism space, in as far as where oftentimes, I mean, I find myself in a very position. You're sitting there and people are talking about all these big words, and you're trying to first and foremost translate whatever English words are being thrown at you into your mother tongue, and you really struggle for that. So I think there's an opportunity for us to start debunking or breaking down and simplifying our language. So that as we engage with the rural community, we need to remember that oftentimes the people that are still living in rural locations are people that don't necessarily have any way to leave rural locations, right? So they might be there by their own material conditions or lack of opportunities and so forth. So if you want to have a conducive space to get the voice of people in the rural locations, you're going to have to make the discourse more easily understandable for the very people. And in no way am I suggesting that people are unable to understand. I'm just suggesting that there should be different ways for us to communicate and make sense of what we're trying to advocate for. So that is one point that I wanted to make, because I do agree with that, is I found myself in a lot of those kind of conversations also. And another point was, and you're talking about, or this question that I was referring to was talking about the exclusion of voice of young people in planning processes, or the tick box reality. And that we found to be actually because young people are not at the table. So yes, there's one point to say that we need to get the voice of young people to be reflected in our discussions, in our planning, in our policies. But at the same time, we need young people to actually be in the room. So there's such a lot of barriers to young people's participation that actually result in them not necessarily being at the table. So I just think that we as a collective are having to be a lot more careful and deliberate about engaging with young people in innovative ways. I was quite intrigued to hear from Lucano, for example, on the Democracy Builder and the programs with the Rivonia Circle, because I do think there's a lot of value and merit in bringing those kind of programs to rural locations. And I see some colleagues from Malmesbury, which is my neighboring municipality also. And just finally on sort of our own methodology for youth philanthropy. So in essence, it is about the young people coming together, groups of young people, up to 10 young people, for example, forming what we call a fund committee. And those young people actually, through various community mapping and exercises, determine the pressing community issues that they want to respond to. And I want to say, sort of qualify this by saying that there's this notion of people having to have the global understanding of what's happening, to really be clear and understand what is the various things that are impacting the lived realities in locations all around the world. But my view is that as much as you understand the global dynamics, you're still going to have to act at the local level. And if we are not implementing programs and not bringing development interventions that reflect to the very issues, speak to the very issues at the community level, then it doesn't make sense in any case. For example, we just completed a research piece on the role of civil society organization into achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And the truth is that the Sustainable Development Goals, being these global goals, they're only going to be sort of achievable or make the success or the impact that is desired if they are implemented at the community level. So it's really about creating conducive spaces for people to speak out, to have their voice heard, but to have programs that truly reflect and respond to the issues that people live with on a day-to-day basis. So the Youth Bank program then allows for people to identify those very issues and then to raise funds to then contribute grants to projects and programs and organizations that actually do work in terms of responding to the very issues. Finally, the point made on how there's almost like an urban hoard within the sector of resources where sort of funds are absorbed and hoarded within urban locations. And oftentimes, and I agree, that organizations that operate and does amazing work at the rural and the local level are living hand to mouth. And I do think we need to think innovatively, collaboratively about sharing the wealth, sharing the resources, so that indeed the impact of our work are felt and change are felt at the community level. I hope I responded to your question.
Thank you, Jeremy. I do note that there's a question, if you can just go ahead and answer it, from Anushka, where she says that, can you please just go on to the Youth Bank program? And then there's another one in terms of, sorry, I'm trying to find that Anushka, she wanted to just find out about another program as well in the chats of about My Town, if you can answer those two.
Oh, My Town, yes. So Anushka did, oh yes, about the My Town. Thanks, Anushka, for that. So the My Town program, in Afrikaans, we call it My Dorp. So the My Dorp program is a program that actually we do it with school-going young children, school-going kids from grades 10 to 12, and even younger, where we would just ask them a very simple question, that what would transform your town into what you would call your dream town? Because the truth is that where you're living is your place that is connected to your own identity. You should have pride, or you do often have pride in your place. But often there's some things missing that will actually, if these facilities or resources were here, that it'll transform for you your town into your dream town. So our methodology is quite simple. We really use design thinking, where we have a creativity workshop with these kids, and the kids would actually sketch their dream town ideas. They would make a sketch of it in a creativity workshop, and then university students would actually translate those sketches into concepts, making more sort of professional type drawings of the children's sketches. And then the third stage is actually where they would build scale models of those concepts and present those scale models back to the children. And what we then do is we then present in an exhibition, we present those scale models to decision makers, be they municipal officials, local business leaders, present those scale models in an exhibition to be able to potentially get funding to implement some of those dream town ideas that came from the kids. Now, of course, what we're hoping for, that we're striving for, is as we get some of these ideas in the IDP documents, if we get some of these ideas funded through our Youth Bank program and potentially funded through government and corporate funding, then over time we'd show young people that indeed their ideas can become a reality. And this is what we're really trying to show through the My Town or My Dorp program, that indeed your own dreams and ideals can indeed become a reality.
One last question for you, Mr. Bowman. This is coming from Mondli from Afra, who's asking, how do we get youth activism at grassroots level, especially in schools? What are the challenges in addressing this?
It's a very interesting question because most of this our sector is struggling to get young people involved. And I think Ayaka even spoke about the importance of even getting topics like or subject matters like climate change and others into the school curriculum. And there appear to be a resistance to that for some reason. But just as far as civil society, we can certainly do a lot more in our work at the local level to engage with other structures. I think we can best do this in collaboration. Most of the change that has happened, but might have started with an individual organization, an individual, but oftentimes movements was built by followers and supporters of initiators. So I do think there's a lot of value in collaborating. There's a lot of value in celebrating champions like Tshintsha Makaya, the work that they're doing. If other organizations go ahead and share the work of organizations like TA is really useful to get the message out in a broader scale, because the truth is one organization will not be able to reach everywhere with all these various challenges we are sitting with. I do think in as far as schooling is concerned, often what we have found the best way to actually get entry into schools to engage with young people, with pupils, is to work directly with principals and potentially with school governing bodies, where there's a desire and openness to working together. Because we found it quite difficult to engage directly by virtue of the Department of Education to have entry into schools because of the perceived impact on the delivery of the school curriculum. So individually, we then engage with primary school teachers and high school teachers who then allow us to have entry and to have access to the learners. So there is just a suggestion that I would make.
Thank you so much. Just to close, because I do see more questions coming up, but I'm worried about time. So if you can just because there are people that are interested to find out how they can get involved in the youth bank programs. If you can just summarize that for us so that we then move on into the space of the new segment. But I do also just want to highlight, colleagues, that this is the work and part of the objectives of this webinar is basically to build these partnerships and to bring these services also to the network. So definitely Mr. Moman will also be alongside Tshintsha Makaya, by bringing these to communities and seeing how we can pilot the work and sharing also the services and offerings that they'll be bearing. So you'll be definitely hearing a lot from them. But if you can just summarize for us that journey, and then we can move on into that segment. Thank you.
In summary, I would confirm what you just said. Colleagues in the movement, just to reach out to TA and to Tshintsha Makaya and be in touch with us in that way. Otherwise, if you'd just like to learn more about directly from our organization, you can reach out to us as well through Facebook. It's the Initiative for Community Advancement. But we prefer, in fact, to work via Tshintsha Makaya movement.
Thank you so much, and for hanging in there with a lot of people being interested in those questions for you. It's actually quite amazing, because this is also the purpose of these sessions, for information exchanging as well. We are now moving to a thrilling session. This session is basically for young youth activists, where they get to just share their powerful stories and challenges and experiences from their communities. It's called the Amplifying Activists, Stories for Land and Food Justice. I've stipulated 10 minutes for each 3 participants. We're going to start with Mr. Kenneth Matlawe, who is an activist coming from the Housing Assembly. Let me try to start your video there. Mr. Kenneth, please come up. Comrade. And if I can, yes, hi there. And if I can ask the following speakers as well to please, the 2 other speakers, to please raise your hand so that we can see where you are in the chat. Unfortunately, you won't have video, but audio. And that is Ms. Asanda Makatla from Limpopo and Ms. Notando Shake from Basket KZN. Thank you. How are you, Mr. Matlawa? Good to see you, comrade. I see you there, Kay.
Yes,
Take it away.
I'm also sitting with the chairperson here.
I see the chairperson.
What is mandated to say. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, take it away. Thank you so much for joining us. The platform is yours.
Thank you again, Apiwe, and thanks to Tshintsha Makaya for the platform to be able to share some of my own experience as a youth activist. So I want to start off first with the concept of youth, because I think there's a disjuncture somewhere between what we call youth. For example, to make a comparison is that, you know, when we talk of gender, we don't talk of the physical sex that the teachers talk of, you know, the concept of sexual orientation. So then, in the same way, youth should also be spoken of the same way, that when we talk of youth, we shouldn't be talking of the actual age of people, but as an orientation. So that is what I wanted to start with, because sometimes we get confused on what the youth. To continue then, I think first try and build a small context. First, I think, you know, in South Africa, when we talk of poverty, talk of unemployment, we are talking basically because there's high levels of unemployment in South Africa. The majority of those who are unemployed, I mean, unemployment could be easily standing at 80% in the country. And this is made possible by many levels of the system, the neoliberal system that we are in South Africa. Secondly, I also think in terms of building a context that the notion of patriarchy, we should also be thinking about it, because on one hand, yes, there is the oppression of women, but there is also the oppression of youth within patriarchal norms. You know, the voice of the young ones are always oppressed. You're still young, you don't know anything, you know, you must sit down and listen to advice of the older people. So our voices always get crushed based on that, you know, patriarchal notion. And lastly, in building a context, I think in struggles, we are involved in struggles. In fact, we are at the forefront of struggles, but this doesn't often translate to leadership in movements. Then when we look at leadership, then we say, hey, youth are not involved, but actually majority of grassroots struggles, it's youth and of course women that are taking forward the struggle, but it doesn't translate to them actually leading the movement from the front. And which then, for myself as a housing activist, you know, I found within my organization that when we talk of lack of housing, lack of access to land, the focus is mainly on parents. The focus is not on the youth that also face the very same struggles, maybe in a particular way, but facing the very same struggles. Focus is not there. For example, overcrowded household, you'll always know that are chased out of the house, that there's no space to walk around, you must go play outside. But also when they are outside, they are told, you know, there's gangsterism and drug abuse outside, you stay in the house. So the youth are in a very, you know, kind of like between a rock and again, also, there's also this dialectic of spaces. Even within my own movement of housing, we created a youth collective. But over time, we see that with creating separate youth spaces, also making use of second, because then you just get told, but not the space for you guys to discuss this thing. Gets taken off, you know, the main table, the motherboard table of the organization, and then things are relegated to our youth space. And then, of course, then within the country, that youth, we are always considered as a transitional community that is not very stable. That is, the process from adolescence to adulthood. So then, based on that, also we are then marginalized from land and housing. For example, University in 2004 made a pronouncement saying that RDP and BNG houses will no longer be given to youth. Anyone under the age of 40 will not be receiving these houses because they are not clearly youth are, because we are a transitional community, we are then taken out not to be able to get access to housing, get access to land. And on the issue of food, I think, yes, one first is the very big issue that because majority unemployed, there are many youth that go to bed hungry, lack of access to. But it's not just the lack of access to food, also the lack of access to nutritional food. So those who do have access don't have access to nutritional food. It's all this very unhealthy kind of like takeaways, kind of like food that we get, and it's not nutritional, and then it doesn't build up, the body as much as we love. And also continuing on the point of food, nowadays we find even in our education curriculum that agricultural education is optional. We are no longer taught how to farm, we are no longer taught it's optional, or one have to choose by themselves to be able to, to get agricultural education. It's not compulsory, which I think should be compulsory. But we shouldn't make the mistake of thinking that education in and of itself will help people out of the predicament that we are in, because also we've seen through matric students, through the TVET colleges that have been opened up, that education doesn't translate necessarily to employment. And there are many people in educational programs, but it doesn't translate into them having a source of income or having a source of a way to sustain it. So yes, while we're looking for agricultural education, in and of itself, it won't suffice. My second last point is that also, as youth, we are seen as the scourge of society. On one hand, people are saying, the future, the youth, the future, but also we are seen as the most unruly bunch of society, the ones who are in crime, the ones who are in substance abuse. We are seen as the ones who are not, how can I say, good citizens or good members of society. So then we have to encourage from here on, as Housing Assembly, we've tried, we have to encourage that, one, we need to set up talk talk amongst ourselves in terms of worker and consumer cooperative, because the society, the capitalist society in South Africa as it stands now, all youth won't be able to get jobs, all youth won't be able to get the life that we deserve. So we have to kind of like what's the word, encourage self-agency for youth to take up issues that affect them directly by them, their efforts into it. And just lastly, that we have to innovative and creative ways of organizing, and to get the youth involved in the struggle, because our struggle right now is still inherited from the liberation struggle. We are still operating like the UDF in 1980s. We have not yet find a way in which you can be involved in movement as much as anyone else. So we need to find innovative ways. But by that, I don't mean that you only be on the digital stuff and the new issues. All the issues that affect from climate change, adapting and mitigation of climate change, from lack of education and dropouts and so on, as well as unemployment. All of these issues, we have to find creative ways for us to deal with them. Yes, yeah, I think that's my main point. And then I had a few examples, like for example in the informal settlement where I stay in Barcelona, in the Western Cape. In community meetings, when community meetings are called, when discussions are taking place and when issue comes up, it's always dealt with as if, you know, we don't understand what we do, or we don't understand our struggle, or we don't have understand the solution that is needed for these things. And I think it's one of the things that really discourages you from participating in the struggle, because at all times we're treated as if, you know, we don't have the information, we don't know nothing, and we should be taught what to do, and so on. So on that basis, thanks for the platform. Yeah, I'll step down.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that presentation. Kenneth, we can always rely on you and Housing Assembly for doing the activist work or the Lord's work, as some put it. Siyabulela. I will now just want to move on into our new storytelling activist. Trying to figure out if you are there for me, Ms. Notanda Shange. KZN, please raise up your, yes. Okay, let me promote you. Thank you. Let me promote you so that we can share your video for us, all right? Promote you to Are you able to share your video? Please try. Notando? Or you can go ahead if you are not able to. Thank you. Yeah. I see that you've joined. Please just enable your video.
Yeah. Yes, I'm here.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Hello, Sissy. Please take it away. This is your moment. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tshintsha Makaya. Good day, everyone. My name is Notando Shange. I'm based in Eshowe in KwaZulu-Natal. I'm from KwaZulu Regional Christian Council, which is an organization that is based in KwaZulu-Natal. I just want to thank you, Tshintsha Makaya, for giving us an opportunity to share our work, our experiences with other colleagues. We hope that it might help other people, maybe. I just want to show you what we have done in our groups as women. We are a group of 35 women under KFCC. How it started, we identified challenges that we had as a community in our area. And then the first challenge was poverty, which is covering food insecurity, water, and access to information. We believe that even access to information, if you can't access information, you're still poor, because we have nothing to do without information. We started to address our challenges by starting savings. We started to save to form groups from 5 to 10 in a group, and each and every week these groups are having meetings where they discuss their challenges as a group, and in their areas they started to save R2 each. These R2 were going to help them to create something like a loan whereby they loan each other, so that each person might go and start something that is going to help her as a woman, like starting a small business in order to survive. We started this in 2009. We starting by saving R2 a week, and it continued as loans to the people only in the group, and they started to use it for business makings. We also addressed the issue of food insecurities. We discovered that it is an embarrassment to us as Africans to always complain about not having food, not having a meal, while we have something like even a small anyana land in front of you. You can do something with that land. And then we started to encourage our members to start small anyana gardens, so that they can start by helping themselves and providing to their families. So they started those gardens while they are continued savings. They grow up in their gardenings and they become to be farmers. They started farming whereby they are not planting their vegetables to eat only, but to sell to the people, to the communities, and to the supermarkets in town. Our challenge was water. We also had a huge challenge when it's come to access to water, because even at school, our children were having a challenge of accessing water. So we start we began to teach each other how can we build water tanks for our children in different schools. We started there, and each school we built a water tank so that children will be provided with water. We also started different businesses like spaza shops. We sold secondhand clothes. We sold vegetable that we are still selling it. We started cosmetics businesses. We made sewing. We made poultry and blocks making that we are selling. Those blocks making that we were selling, we had a huge, I can say it's a fortune, whereby contractors who were building RDP houses, like the toilets in the village. So they bought these blocks from us so that they built these toilets in the village. I can say, we also had catering groups who were catering people in order to get a profit so that they look after their families. The impact that we've seen from all these activities are marvelous. We built 149 houses through the profits that we made out of these savings, and we also renovated 58 houses. Our children are now attending schools, not only in schools, even tertiary schools. Our children are now able to pay transport to their schools, and we can see that even our nutrition to our children and families has been improved. You know, for those people who grew up maybe in the 80s, early 90s, that can tell you that on those times, there were that thing that it's called proper food. I can say that, whereby you come back from school and you find that there is a bowl full of umbila or full of amadumbe, and so by that time people have no idea on how to make a beautiful presentation when it's come to food in order to support the nutrition. So by now, we have learned that we have to make a beautiful presentation on food so that we eat a balanced meal. We also teach each other to prepare that kind of food. We also assisting children to the journey of life, starting from 1,000 days of a child, whereby the mother is pregnant. We work with the mother, educating her what kind of food that she must eat as she's pregnant. We educate her about meal that her baby should take. It must be a healthy food and all that kind of stuff. She must attend clinics. Yeah, since the baby is growing. We built water tanks. I've mentioned that. I've mentioned that we started to address social issues like the people's health and gender-based violence. We've seen that there are many issues that we are coming across when it's come to gender-based violence, especially violence to children and women in our area. So we are attending that issues by having dialogues. We are attending a protest where there is a need of protest, and we are also attending education when it's come to gender-based violence. We still have challenges when it's come to especially farming, as even if we have youth in our projects, but we don't have enough youth. We're still looking forward to have more youth to participate in this project, because we know the future of this country is youth. So if the people can't use the land that they have, because what we have discovered that in some other areas, people have a piece of land, it might be 2 hectares, 3 hectares, but most people are not using that land. Mostly they will say it is because they can't access water, but we are educating people means of harvesting water during rain seasons. And another challenge that we have, we are still struggling communicating with relevant departments like Department of Health. If I can tell you, even these days, there's this call for hemp. It's hemp or I think it's hemp or cannabis license that they are busy registering. But you'll find that in our communities, people don't have that information because there is no communication between people and the departments. So we are also looking forward to work with these departments to communicate with people. This is what we have done in our area, and we thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to share to you what we are doing as women, because at the end of the day, people who are being challenged with social ills, yes, men are also being challenged, but it's women, because women are the people who are staying with children at home. Women are the people who are looking after their families, even the sick people in home. So it all comes to women and be a challenge to them. So it is important to give information and literacy to women, so that they are able to be self-reliant than be depending to other people. So this is what we are doing in our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. You did so much justice to the presentation on your community. Thank you so much, Sis Matano, for also sharing. And I see a lot of people getting excited with hearts and claps. That is great. Thank you for showing the intersections, especially because, I mean, when you talk about land, food, or water security, you cannot exclude women at all. And in fact, it's a core and part of the work that as Tshintsha Makaya is that we believe that we are also a feminist alliance as well, because those are really important pillars. Thank you so much for gracing us. I'm now just going to move on to the Eastern Cape. I do hear that we have Asana Makadla on our chats. Please just indicate for me by raising your hand so that I can also promote you to the panelists, and then you will be able to enable your video. Thank you so much, Lutando. Asanda, please raise your hand from wherever you are. If you are in this meeting. Is Asana Magadla in the space? GCOE, can you please assist? Or are they facing technical issues? Unfortunately, and I do love also these technical issues and what they are also showing us, especially in the space and the sector that we're in, where some of us are also in rural areas and we face these challenges of connection as well that are deeper and also stand in the way of the justice work and development that we'd like to do as either NGOs or alliances. Unfortunately, then these are things that we also are beyond us. But thank you so much to the activists as well for sharing their insights and experiences, because I mean, it starts with you. You know what you need and what your community needs. I've noted, Kenneth, a question, I think it's directed to you, from Umukezi Diba, who poses a question in terms of food insecurity and how we can, excuse me, let me try. Sorry, let me try to assess the question. Hold on. Okay, so they concur in terms of asking the question to me is how we can assess and ensure that we sell our produce. Are you able to answer that, Kenneth? Do you want to perhaps answer that, comrade? Okay, thank you so much.
And then I see this is on the question of worker and consumer cooperative. So I think for me, it starts by, for us to put new norms into society. It has to be innovative, and there has to be a repetition of so in my view, I think first and when we do community gardens and cooperative gardens, that first it should be to assist or alleviate the food insecurity in community. That first you produce in a way to make it cheaper for communities to access the food. And in that, then what is the capitalist word? You market yourself, and then it becomes a norm society that they got from you. Because I think the first thing we always do when we think of worker cooperatives, that we need to access this market, the market that is very capitalist, that is that wants competition amongst different producers. So instead of looking at that market, I think also we need to create our own market. We need to create a market where accessible to people, but also it can alleviate our own unemployment issue as well as the food. We have to establish a market. This market of capitalist system, in fact, it's forcing us to produce our food in a particular way. Your Monsantos, your food outlets, McDonald's, and so on. They are forcing us to produce our food in a way, and if you don't, then your produce won't be like this bias. So let's create our own market by response. sufficiently.
Thank you for that, Kenneth. I hear Asanda, you are using, where are you? I'm going to ask one more time. Asanda Magadla, if you're online, whichever laptop you are using, please raise up your hand so that we can see and unmute you. Thanks. We are just going to move on to the next speaker.
Hi, everyone. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm with Comrade Andile Mapisa, Nonkulileko, Praedi. We are watching in Eastern Cape, King Williamstown.
Sorry, Asanda, before you start, Ryan, I'm not able to see which account she's using. If you can just promote her to panelist so that we can see the video.
Join as panelist.
Are you using Eddie?
Yes, she's on Eddie. There we go.
There, thank you so much, Brian. You're the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, comrades. Finally, we get to see a group. Hello.
We've been struggling and we've been trying.
I am very biased right now because this is the Eastern Cape. I'm coming back tomorrow. Sorry, please take it away.
Yes.
Thank you, comrades. Yeah, I think now. You can speak, Asanda. Go ahead. The comrades sit down. Thank you.
I would like to greet everyone who's joining the webinar. It's a privilege and honor for us as young activists in the Eastern Cape. We thank this opportunity that gives us a platform to share our views and also to be empowered as well, because these are the spaces that gives youth a chance to voice out. So, so far, I am gaining knowledge, and my comrades, especially Comrade Andile, he wanted to ask questions because we've been jotting down some notes and we've been discussing, you know. So, Andile, do you want to say something?
No. Okay. Greetings, everyone. Thanks for this opportunity, and it's a privilege and honor to be, to be in this space in this Youth Month. This month is very, it's emotional and it's highly political. And now I was, about to ask a question in mobilizing youth and getting youth involved in activism. So I was asking myself this question, and I'm asking this question to everyone here in this webinar. So the question of how do you get, or how do you change the mindset of the youth that is filled up with extremely groove on weekends, and they dress down on weekends. They don't know anything about, to go and entertain themselves. So how do you, get those youth there in their, in their places of, entertainment? So how do you, how do you change that mindset? So that you can see the, the land issue as, as a central in their livelihoods, yeah, and their lives as well. So how do you, how do you change that mindset? And another question is, how do you take the, this language, climate catastrophe, climate change and all that, how do you take, take this language, back to, to our respective township.
Sorry, comrades, sorry to cut you there, sorry to cut you. Please remember, comrades, that we had a Q&A session and that is specifically for these type of questions. We do get that certain panelists were not able to answer because of having to leave as well. Asanda, you are the speaker in this current moment and you are supposed to share as within your 10 minutes. Can you allow your space and take the platform and take power, please? Thanks.
Hi, Apiwe. Hello. Can you hear
Yes,
me?
yes, Asana.
Okay, I won't be long. I'll just be brief.
Thank you.
Because I come from one of the biggest townships in the Eastern Cape or in South Africa, which is Tanzania. And we know that East London is now facing a lot of youth challenges because if you remember, I think sometime this year we had 21 patrons who died at Enyobeni Tavern. And I am trying to work on with my community because now it's getting out of hands to have youth still going to those places, that are a danger to themselves, because now we have more of Inyobeni taverns around in our communities, and that's where you'll find youth. And to make things worse, the Inyobeni tavern is operating as normal even now, in this month of June, where we lost 21 patrons. So as youth, I believe that these sessions, I'm asking myself, what changes am I making in my community? Because now I feel like we need to launch a campaign where we need to take it to those taverns, where we need to educate our kids, because I feel like they're not engaging with us when we are at our local offices. They're not reaching us. We need to go out to them in person to tell them, to educate them about the land justice, the food justice, the food sovereignty, and the water challenges, because those challenges are not only for us, but for the whole community, and we need their voices, because the youth of today, they're not given these platforms to share their views, whereas they have so much to say, and they've got potential and ability to share their views, and their views are much welcome, because they still the face of our country, So I still feel like I need to do more. I need to work more. We need to work more. We still have a chance, we still have a chance. And I like the fact that Jeremy shared something about the language, the political language. We need to simplify it in a way that they understand, because now the language is like propaganda. Even us, you need to go and search and Google those words that they use there. So even myself, for me to understand about the land justice, I was educated. When I started doing agriculture, that's when the movement set me down, by also inviting me to participate. And then I got educated, and I am sharing, to the youth that is around me, and I see change, because now in the township, agriculture and farming is not something that we grew up doing. And now I can see the movement and the changes in our community to say people are starting small, you know, they don't go and buy vegetables like before. They prefer to plant those vegetables themselves, you know. And now having these difficult policies for us to engage, it's discouraging, but we have Tshintsha Makaya, we have TCOEs, we have Inyanda that are assisting us to fight those policies, to have say, to influence it, you know. Even now approaching elections, you know, most youth did not even care about election. When we talk about election time, they were like, what is it that is going to change? Anyway, you know, the party is gonna win, whether you vote or you don't vote. But now they have a different approach about it because they're not educated enough about political engagement. So now having these sessions is about giving it back to the community. It's not all about myself, but for everyone, because I'm not representing myself only. When I go out, I'll engage, I'll continue engaging with youth, you know, and I'm one person. When I see a problem, I know a problem goes with solution. Where there's a problem, there is a solution in everything. And I believe this is one of the solutions that as youth we need to see. Yes, there are challenges, some are within our control and some we cannot control. However, if we are expanding our movements, then something definitely will change, you know. It's all about the vision, it's all about the passion. Don't give up, you know. So I'd like to thank Tshintsha Makaya and TCOE and everyone else for giving us this opportunity. Thank you, Apiwe.
Thank you so much, Asanda. And very much also, Asanda, we do learn to take up spaces, because as you've just articulated what you need, the challenges so well, and that's why you are the speaker and in this last segment, because you know your issues, and that's why women deserve to take up spaces whenever they can. Thank you so much, colleagues, and good to see you all, and thank you to all the activists that have played a huge role in this segment. Because we are running out of time, I'd like to honestly just invite Ms. Laurel Otto, who is the Executive Director at the Association of Rural Advancement, which is also known as AFRA. She will be taking us through the following segment on the Rural Charter, and thereafter we have our last speaker who will close and consolidate for us, which I'll introduce afterwards. Please welcome, Laura. Please, can you just...
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, yeah, perfect. Please take it away. Please let me know if you are able to share your screen.
Yep, it seems to be working.
Perfect, all the best.
Brilliant, thanks. Sure, thanks so much for the great debate and space today. I do want to apologize for not being a young person and presenting into your space, but consider this a handing of the baton, as I'm presenting on something that has been historically that I've been involved in, and something that we very much are wanting to say to the youth. Please get involved, please take it forward. Hopefully the next presentation that's done on the Tshintsha Makaya Rural Equality Charter will be done by a young person. So there's a challenge to you all, and I hope you grab it and run with it. So I have the opportunity to very briefly, and I will try keep it brief, just to introduce you to the Rural Equality Charter that was developed by Tshintsha Makaya members over quite a number of years, and kind of came together and got consolidated during the very strange times of COVID, when so much was happening online and our world was turned a little bit upside down. why did Tshintsha Makaya decide that a rural equality charter was something important to create? So it emerged from engagements with all the members of Tshintsha Makaya, both community and civil society members. And you've heard a bit today earlier around the structure of Tshintsha Makaya. And it was really to say, how can we find something that brings us together in a very coherent way so that when we have our campaigns, when we come together as activists, we have something that binds us, but also something that is a very public statement that we can make together. So the charter starts with the statement, we, the rural people of South Africa, declare our needs for our government and the world to know. And that is the strength with which the charter starts and with which it continues. So how was it created? Again, I'm going to quote directly from the charter itself. And, you know, there's been some discussion today around language and the importance of having language that is accessible, that, that includes people, that doesn't exclude them. So there was a very conscious decision that this charter must be in the voice of communities and accessible to all. And I'm pleased to say that we have also reached the point of translating it into local languages. I know there was a KwaZulu-Natal platform engagement in this month in which community members were able to engage with an isiZulu version, which, yeah, it's the kind of progress we're really needing to see. So in the words of the charter, all demands presented and quotations, all quotations included, came from a series of participatory processes with strong and effective participation of us, the rural community partners of Tshintsha Makaya, and are endorsed by all members of the Alliance. So it was a series of consultative processes that layered upon layer upon layer refined what was ultimately included in the charter. It started with a number of in-person workshops that took place that Tshintsha Makaya holds national indabas that bring together community activists and civil society members, and has done so for many years. So there were discussions at national indabas, there were discussions within civil society organizations in partnership with their communities. There were emails, there were online webinars to discuss them, and layers and layers of inputs that evolved into the final charter that we now have. So what is included in the charter? So the objective, again, in the words of those who wrote it, are to state our demands and vision of social justice for the rural, poor and oppressed, based on the needs of people, to strengthen the agency and movement of rural communities in claiming and defending their land and natural resource rights in South Africa, to ensure that gender justice and women's empowerment be unequivocally centered in all aspects of rural equality demands, to ensure a better life for all, to end violence against women and children, and to demand for secured tenure rights for rural people and adequate budgets for the development of rural communities. In terms of what's covered by the charter, in order to reach those objectives, there are 11 sections in the charter, and each one starts with an analysis of the context that's relevant, and then is followed by a list of very specific demands. So that's the way in which it's structured. There isn't time to take you through it all. I'm sure Priscilla, who will come after me, will share more around where you can access the full charter and how to engage with it going forward. But for now, I'm just sharing with you the overview. So the different sections that are included in the charter are firstly looking at small-scale farmers, emergent household farmers and fishers. Secondly, unpacking the context and demands of farm workers and dwellers. Thirdly, the specific demands of labor tenants and their land rights. Fourthly, gender justice. Fifthly, a very specific piece of legislation called the Transformation of Certain Rural Areas Act, TRANCRA. So you'll see there's a range of very high level big issues like gender justice, but there's also very specific focus on saying there are very specific things that right now our government and our country need to move on. So it's a beautiful blend of the very specific and the much broader context. So the 6th section focuses specifically on forestry settlements, the 7th on communal areas, the 8th on mining affected communities, the 9th on the Ingonyama Trust, the 10th looks at land restitution and communal property institutions, and the 11th is looking at land redistribution and equitable access to land. So that's a very brief overview of what is the Rural Equality Charter. But really what it is a document that is something for us to listen to, because it is in the voice of communities from across, as you've heard, all of these different rural contexts, looking at many of the critical issues. You probably would have noticed some things that are missing from there that you would maybe be surprised by. You might be wondering, why isn't the climate crisis highlighted in such an important charter? And I will say it is something that evolved out of the issues that people were grappling with at the time. And this is over, as I said, pre-COVID times, and it emerged from grassroots level. So it's not a complete once-off set of demands. It needs to be something that is kept alive. It is a specific advocacy tool to listen to, highlight the voices of rural communities. But as Tshintsha Makaya has evolved, and it's very exciting for me as someone who's been involved for, I would say, coming on for 8 years in TA, how much it as a platform has evolved and really opened up to saying, we need to break through these power dynamics that have been talked about today, whether it's between civil society organizations and communities, whether it's between the urban and the rural, whether it's looking at gender or at the issues that we came together around today, which is saying we need to be sure that if we are passionate about young people, that we are finding innovative ways to be talking not on behalf of, but with and supporting young people. So at the moment, I know provincial platforms are being set up, new, much broader community-based platforms than we've seen before, which is really exciting, and they're engaging with the charter. But what we also need is to hear from you, not necessarily today, but to think about, and as we move forward, what we need in Tshintsha Makaya is youth voices clearly coming through and engaging with and being heard and saying, okay, there are these tools. So what do we want to do with them? How can we take this charter and make it relevant to young people? Are there ways, do we need to have boot camps for young people? Are there, what are your ideas? Because we need to keep asking ourselves these questions so that we are responsive, so that we keep evolving and we keep growing and we keep being willing to hand over our own power and privilege, and be able to let go of that and pass it on. And today is very much in a celebration of saying we want to be innovative in how we bring young voices in. And I hope that very brief flavor of what a rural equality charter for Tshintsha Makaya is might have inspired you to think, wow, there's something here that could be a fantastic and powerful way to engage with young people and to really ignite that activism across our different spaces. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Laura. That was amazing, simple, straight to the point, and you've already just, I think, made it easier for our last speaker because you've just also consolidated the takeaways from this webinar. Right now, our last speaker, and I definitely also just hand over to him. I'd like to introduce Mr. Molatelo Mohale from Ngos Development Association. He will be providing us with consultation and closing. Welcome, comrade. We finally meet over online. He has been laughing at me saying that the last time I was supposed to be in Limpopo, I missed my flight. So this is our first meetup. Hi, welcome, comrade, and over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, comrade. Nice to meet you too. Good afternoon, comrades. Yeah, my work is a bit difficult than everyone else, but I'll try to be brief. So, my name is Molatelo Mohale, as introduced by Apiwe. I'm an activist and a writer who is currently attached to Ngos Development Association. So Ngos is a land rights advocacy organization and a partner of TA. We are based in Limpopo province. So I will not bore you with a lot of information because you already heard from a lot of speakers. I'll just summarize, especially from the first two speakers from Brian and Priscilla, and then go straight to the discussions. So I picked up one key point from Brian's presentation when he jogged our memories of the uprising of the 19 June 1976 youth, which challenged the deprivation and structural exclusions head on. So from there, I thought perhaps we can also adopt the high-level militancy into our work and use it to pressurize those in power to start listening to young people. By the way, I'm no longer a young person. I've transitioned. I'll also apologize, just like Laurel, to be in this space, but I work with young people every day. So in terms of Priscilla's statement, there is also one key element that she highlighted, which is about not only TA formulated to be a space where people will share their struggle, but also to share their resilient strategies and how to build this network involving young people, and also enabling these young people to be self-reliant. And this is linked to the strategy that Jeremy mentioned of young people being self-reliant and be self-funded from their youth bank strategy. So in terms of the challenges, I picked up a few challenges, and then one of the challenges that I picked up is around, which featured in almost all the speakers, is around marginalization, which include deprivation of people from food, poverty, and this happens both in urban and rural settings. And there is also an issue around access to information and lack of access to resources This includes financial resources, property, which include houses, land, food, water, etc. And when this happens, young people feel like they're oppressed. And there is also one of the speakers, I think is Kenneth, mentioned that there is also a narrative that young people are deemed unruly and irresponsible cohort. And they are also excluded from participating in public platforms. I also picked up an issue which relate to land tenure issues. I think it was mentioned by Lukona, which he talks about people in rural areas only having PTOs as the only form of recognition of some sort of occupation, although they deem themselves as owners of that particular land parcel. Sorry, I missed something in terms of lack of access to information, which was shared by, I forgot the name of the lady who was presenting about the climate change issues. So she mentioned that climate change is an issue as it impacts our life, but it's also an issue because young people don't know what climate change is and how they can respond to it. She also mentions about several platforms where young people can participate and start sharing their views. She specifically mentioned the Climate Change Commission, which was established by the president a few months ago. And she also mentioned that there are also provincial platforms where young people can sign up and start engaging from that space. So I also got few survival strategies that I touched down. And one of them is about, it's related to income generating projects. There was a speaker who mentioned about a women group that were involved in a number of income generating projects, which included establishment of spaza shops, catering companies, sewing and other handworks, which they use to survive and also assist their communities. And I was also impressed by what a lot of people they call it giving back to the community, where she mentioned that they built around 149 houses for people in her area. And this money was collected from their profit that they've been making from those various income generating projects. And she also mentioned the spaces that are created, like your dialogue, and also engagement, like protestations where they feel like the authorities are not listening to them. And then there is also a youth bank strategy that Jeremy spoke about, and also a youth participation platform. This sounds very interesting for me, that it's something that is already existing, which I think can be duplicated in other spaces, and we can test it and see if it can work in other spaces. A fundraising mechanism where young people can mobilize resources and utilize the funds for their own costs. So I also got few suggestions from the presentations, which include alliance building, and also civil society consolidating its work into one strong group without losing their respective identity or what they stand for. There is also a suggestion of sharing resources, be it human resources, financial, etc. And there is also a suggestion to invite the public platforms to get involved and participate in those processes at both national and provincial level. And Laurel also mentioned now, just the last speaker, about a tool that can be used for advocacy purposes, which is called a rural charter, which include the voices of communities from various from their various categories. So I have one last suggestion, which I think we tried in the past as TA to work on, but we are not really picking up, which is around writing articles. And I think we can revert back to that strategy and start empowering each other and see if we can produce a few more writers from our platforms. So in closing, I would like to thank the organizers, a team of organizers led by Apiwe and Priscilla for organizing this opportunity and also giving me this difficult task. I nearly didn't accept this huge task, but I said, let me just try it. And then moving right along, I would also like to thank the participants and all the speakers of the day for their insight and their lived experiences. We're hoping that this is not the end and is just the beginning of us engaging further and strengthening our network. And yeah, so that's it from me. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I guess this is a wrap. Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. We'll be in touch.
Bye. Bye. E-recording.
Priscilla. Just leave the group.